Welcome back, everyone. Figured we'd do something for fun today. Fall season here at the All-Star break for the MLB. 90 something games in for each team. So Liam's a Guardians fan. So welcome back, Liam. Some changes with your life since we last talked. Now the varsity coach over at Hopkinton for basketball.
Yeah, pretty excited. It's quite a step up for me, so we'll see how it goes. But summer's been going well. It's really hot. Pretty sick of it, but it's New England. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I've been doing a lot of different things. Not quite as busy as I usually am, so it's nice to kind of have a little bit of a breather, but doing a lot of stuff still. Little stuff here and there, so that's good. And just figured it'd be cool to hop on today. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
Uh,
for
I was,
sure.
I was figuring we'll start off with the AL East right now. The Orioles right now 1 game ahead of the Yankees, leading the American League. No surprise there, but the bigger surprise probably is that the Red Sox are in third right now, and they're in possession of the last wild card currently. So are they going to be buyers? Are they going to be sellers at the deadline? It certainly looks like they're going to be buyers. Our big question is how big, with the Rays and the Jays trailing behind them. What are your thoughts on the Orioles and the Yankees leading the division?
Yeah, I think they've both been struggling recently. But I think the Orioles are a more complete roster, top to bottom. The Yankees obviously have the two big time hitters with Soto and Judge, and their pitching staff's been kind of overperforming without Garrett Cole. They just got him back. He doesn't quite look like himself yet. We'll see. I think Baltimore is going to trade for a pitcher though, and that'll put them over the top in that division. Would be my guess.
I agree. They already have Corbin Burns. He's been such a great addition. We saw him on opening day. Just an outstanding performance from him. I have him in fantasy, 26 points or something opening day, so that was fun. Yankees, they were on fire for a long time, and then the last month they have not looked themselves. And now the Red Sox are all of a sudden right behind them. I think they're 3.5 back right now. So they're right there. They've been playing really, really well. Jaron Duran's had a great season. Rafael Devers, Tanner Houck, all three of those guys going to the All-Star game. So what do you think? How far do you think the Red Sox can make it, and what do you expect to see out of them at the trade deadline?
Yeah, so I've been telling people like all year that this team is not as bad as people make it out to be. I think Red Sox fans were super down on this team coming into the year, and I think it all stems from the Mookie trade still, like the hangover from that. But the team is really good on paper. They have a really strong pitching staff, which I love. Like I think with good pitching, you could go pretty far. And the lineup is young. Duran's turned into like a superstar. Rafael has been good. I really like David Hamilton. I hope he'll play more. And then Devers is, one of the best players in the league. I'm curious to see what they do at the trade deadline because the ownership has not shown that they want to spend money. So it'll be interesting. They have a pretty strong farm system of young hitters, so they could move those guys if they want to. We'll see. I could see them going after an outfielder, but maybe not like a huge splash would be my guess.
I'm thinking pitching. Since Texas has been struggling so much this year, and they just won the World Series last year, I could see them parting ways with Evaldi, and that would be just like the perfect fit for the Red Sox. Already won a World Series with Nate Evaldi, and 2018 was a big part of the 21 postseason run. So I think that'd be reasonable. Maybe they'll give up a few prospects. I think kind of the untouchable right now is Marcelo Meyer. I would be very surprised if they decided to part ways with him. I don't know that they're going to go all in like they might have been otherwise if they had higher expectations entering the season, and just the state of their ownership. But I do think they'll pick up, a pitcher or two, maybe a middle infielder. Rapiella's been playing well, but you also had Trevor Story who got injured pretty early on in the season.
Yeah, in their farm system, I really like Roman Anthony too, an outfielder for them. If they move him, they could get something really good. And piggybacking off that Evaldi idea, if they wanted to like toss in some extra guys and get Adolis Garcia and just get a big time hitter and a pitcher, I think that would be like an ideal trade for them. And the Rangers, either their owner or their general manager said recently, like if they don't step it up, they're going to be sellers. So I would expect them to move Evaldi, Scherzer, Garcia, unless they turn it around quickly. Because like you said, I mean, the American League is super competitive, and Texas has been pretty disappointing. And I think the World Series hangover is pretty real, and they look like the latest example of it.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I want to get to the Rays and the Jays. First of all, Toronto, super young team. Everybody has high expectations out of them. Seems like each year everybody's like, okay, they're going to get 90 wins. They might win the division. They might snag a wild card spot that they should be in the conversation to make a deep playoff run. And this year they've struggled. They're not in the top three in the division, and they've been in fourth or fifth the entire season pretty much. Why do you think they're having so many struggles?
Yeah, I mean they've dealt with like some minor injuries, but for the most part, like the guys that you've expected to play have played. I mean, I think Vladdy's played almost every single game. He's actually been really good, but the expectations for him are so high that when he's not hitting like the best player in the league, people are disappointed. Um, their pitching staff is pretty weak. I think Gossman has taken a pretty big step back. He's in his mid 30s, so when your ace is like coming into the year like not at his best level or highest level, it's pretty hard for you to rebound from that. Romano, their closer, he's been hurt like all year, and it seems like last year they went into the season, they changed the dimensions of their park, and it's like completely screwed with their hitters. Like it seems like none of them are like Bichette, Vladdy, Justin Turner, George Springer. Like none of those guys have been like at the level we expected them to be at.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate statement. I hadn't really thought about that being the reason that they've had so much struggle offensively, but I think that's a really good point. Just changing the dimensions of the park right now. 14 behind Baltimore in last place, and Tampa right now at 500, 48 and 48. The Rays, they seem to be competitive each year despite having a low level payroll, but just with how competitive the wild card race is, I expect them to not make a really they'll be in the conversation, but I don't think they're going to snag a wild card spot at the end of the season. I think they'll probably pretty much stay where they are and not make any big moves at the trade deadline, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, they're one of the teams. There's a few teams in the league right now where their pitching staff is weaker than their IL of guys that are pitchers. Like they have McClanahan, Rasmussen, and Jeffrey Springs are all on the IL, and those are three like good pitchers. They just got Shane Boz back, but they've had a lot of injuries, and then a Rosarena just has not been the same player. Like it's kind of similar with Toronto. Like when your like marquee guy isn't outperforming expectations, especially in that division, it's just going to be hard for you to succeed. And Tampa, just like Toronto, like they don't have the pitching that Boston, New York, and Baltimore do, so they can't hang. I agree with you. I think they're both going to fall off. I don't really see how Tampa could sneak into the playoffs just with the Twins, Royals, Mariners, and Astros, like, and the Red Sox, obviously. So it's going to be next to impossible. I'll expect them to sell a little bit, but like, I don't really know what they have that they're willing to get rid of because nobody wants to trade for an injured pitcher. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. Let's move over to the Central now. Your Guardians, 58 and 37 in first place. I was not expecting this. I picked the Twins to win the division at the start of the season. I said maybe Cleveland will be a little bit better than people thought, but I was not expecting 21 games above 500 at the All-Star break.
Yeah, I think if anybody tells you that they were expecting that, they're lying. No one thought that they'd have the highest winning percentage in the American League halfway through the season. I certainly didn't. I thought Detroit was actually going to win the division because I love Skubal. I think he's the best pitcher in the league right now. They just can't hit. But Cleveland, I think they've gotten pretty lucky. I love their lineup, but their pitching staff right now is kind of a disaster. Their starters have not been good. They've been, and the team's been sputtering lately, and Minnesota's been on fire. So I think realistically, this is, kind of like at the same level as the Red Sox as a team. I don't think they're quite up there with the Orioles just because of the pitching. We'll see what they do at the trade deadline. They've historically not been big buyers, but if they can get, big name right fielder and then some pitchers, but all these teams are looking for pitchers. So it's going to be hard.
Yeah. All right, so moving over to the Twins now. Actually, one more point I want to make on the Guardians. Like Emmanuel Clase, I've been impressed with him. I think he's been a really good closer for the Guardians this season, so he's been fun to watch. And Jose
Yeah.
Ramirez, obviously still the face of that franchise, but I think they're going to need to take some big swings in order to be competitive in October.
Yeah, the thing with them is they've had the best bullpen in the American League so far, so they've been able to kind of get by with their starting pitchers being mediocre. And obviously, in the postseason, a good bullpen can carry you pretty far, but they've got to get there first. Jose, Naylor, Stephen Kwan, like they're all stars. They've all been awesome this year. I don't know if all three of them can keep it up. I hope they can. Jose obviously will. He's like Devers, like he's just consistent. But
Juan
I
had
think
out of
Minnesota, yeah, Quan is. I love Quan. He's my favorite player in the league. Like his approach at the plate, I think is so impressive, and the fact that he's already had more home runs than he's had in a season before is pretty impressive too. But Minnesota has been on fire. Like they terrify me. That lineup is so good, and that's Royce Lewis is like barely played.
right. I think Minnesota's super competitive. I wouldn't be surprised if they, make a run at winning the division later here in the second half of the season. But I definitely think that the Guardians will at least hold on to a wild card spot with just how impressive they would be, and they have been. And it would take a huge collapse for them to miss out on the postseason. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree with
Minnesota.
that. I think they're both probably going to make the postseason. I think these are two of the better teams in the American League.
Kansas City, they've been a lot better than I expected. They're over 500 in third place, seven back of the Guardians, which is far better than I expected after the season that they had. They were like the second or third worst record in the league last year to the A's and maybe the Rockies. But yeah, they've been good. They have some young talent there. Uh, I kind of feel like they don't have enough. They're too young and that they're not going to be huge buyers. I think they're still a year or two away from really having that lineup at this point in time where they feel like, okay, we believe in our guys and we're willing to make some big swings and give up some prospects to take a shot at it.
Yeah, they're in a very enviable position though because they have Bobby Witt Jr. I mean, when you have a franchise shortstop that's that young and that good already, like every single team wants to have a guy like that. So even if they don't make the playoffs this year, like this is such an enormous step forward for them. And then, like I said with Detroit, how I really like Scooble. I think Cole Reagan's their ace is really, really good. It's funny; these bottom three teams in the Central have three of the best lefty pitchers in the entire league. So it's been fun to watch them go. But Kansas City's just they're very top heavy in the lineup with Witt and Perez and Michael Garcia. But the the bottom half of that lineup just can't hit. And they're not as consistent, I think, as some of these other teams are going to be. But they did just last week trade for Hunter Harvey from the Nationals, who's a pretty good reliever. He's been struggling lately, but I think Kansas City, like, if they're going out and trading for pro relievers, then I think they're going to try and push for it. And when you have a guy like Bobby Witt, you don't want to waste any of his years.
Right. I agree. Just a 500 team. I mean, that's just the way I look at them. That's where I think that they're going to wind up. They're not going to really. I don't know if they're bad enough that I would say that they're going to be sellers. Maybe they could give up a piece or two here, but in order to get something back, but I don't see them being buyers just with how competitive this race is. And you're 3 games under 500 with a super competitive American League wild card race that there's really no point in going all in and giving up, your future when you're still kind of similar to Kansas City. You're a little bit behind Kansas City, but similarly, you're still young and you still got more time. You still got a few more years maybe before you get there. So that's my thoughts on Detroit. And then let's get to the White Sox. I mean, awful. Just
Yeah.
awful. How are you 32 and a half back at the All-Star game? That is atrocious. They're going to be sellers for anybody who anybody wants, I would imagine. They're going to give up and they're going to try and strengthen their farm system. This season, it's over. They have 71 losses now. And like if they get any phone calls and they're offered prospects back, my guess is they're just going to be like, all right, get rid of them. We're not doing anything this year. We just want to stock up our farm system.
Yeah, and they're 10 games worse than Oakland right now. So they're in their own tier at the bottom. And it's sad, but their farm system's not that good. So it's bleak in the South Side right now. But I think Crochet, their ace, is like guaranteed to get traded. Like I think all of these competitive teams could use him and want him. and then Luis Robert Jr., their center fielder, who I think is probably a superstar if he can stay healthy. They could get like a massive haul for him. So I think they're going to finish with 100 losses easily, but hopefully next year they'll have some prospects that their fans can look forward to because right now it's pretty depressing.
Agreed. Moving on to the West, Seattle has been clinging to that number one spot for a while now. Houston had an atrocious April and early May where they dug themselves into a very, very deep hole that I think even I was questioning if they could climb out of, even with how consistently good they've been like the last 5, 6 years. But now they've really turned it on to the point where they're only one game behind Seattle at the All-Star break. I've had them winning that division at the start of the year. My prediction is that they are going to win that division, and Seattle will be in a race with the Yankees, the Red Sox, maybe Guardians, Twins, whoever doesn't win that division for the last wild card spots. So we'll see what happens, but Houston's turned it on. I think they take that division, and I feel bad for Seattle because they have not had a lot of postseason success in comparison to not only baseball teams but all of sports. So I'd really like to see them do well. It's so much fun to watch Julio Rodriguez. He's just been out of this world ever since he came into the league. So they're super easy to root for, but I think Houston's going to end up taking that division, and Seattle's going to be left competing for a wild card spot.
Yeah, Seattle has, in my opinion, the best rotation in the league. They have five elite starters. Brian Wu, their fifth starter, he's been hurt a little bit, but other than that, they've been healthy. And I think pitching can win you games. So they're, like you said, they're going to be there with the Red Sox, the Royals, one of the Twins and Guardians, and the Yankees. Like they're going to be fighting for it. I think they're going to be a sneaky big buyer at the trade deadline. They have a really, really strong farm system. So they could pick up some pretty elite guys if they wanted to. Houston they're just a picture of consistency. I mean, it seems like they do this every single year. They just started off particularly slow this year. They barely had Verlander, but like they've turned Ronel Blanco into a great pitcher, like completely out of nowhere. Jordan is, one of the best hitters in the league. They've been on this run, and Kyle Tucker's been hurt. He'd be starting in the All-Star game, I think, if he played all year. So I hate Houston. Like they're just always going to be like this.
Yeah, I can't stand Houston at all, but it is what it is. Texas, like we said, World Series hangover, 46-50 right now, 5 games behind Seattle. I think they're going to trade Evaldi. My guess is he goes to the Red Sox, like I said earlier. They might trade some other guys. I don't know. I kind of think they'll hold on to Adoldis Garcia, but just with the way things have been going, I have a feeling they're either going to A, do nothing, or B, be sellers, which is just not going to be good enough. I think they're going to finish at best 81 and 81, 500, but I would imagine that they're going to be somewhere in the 70 to 79 win range is my guess.
Yeah,
And
yeah. They're a weird team. They on paper they look really, really good, but they just haven't lived up to the hype this year. Josh Young, their third baseman's been hurt. And then Evan Carter, one of their outfielders, who was like a superstar for them in the playoffs last year, I really, really like, but he's been hurt most of the year. Seager and Simeon are both good. I don't think either of them would get traded, even if they did, fully tank. Simeon much more likely than Seager. I don't think Seager's ever going to get traded again. And then Wyatt Langford, a rookie. I mean, they have one of the best rookies in the league, and they just won the World Series. So it's I'm sure Rangers fans are bummed that they're not winning more games, but the future is still really bright.
I agree with that. I think this is kind of a similar state to the 2019 Red Sox, where like they had just come off a World Series. They had played really well in October to win the World Series, and they had some young talent. But hopefully for the Rangers, their owner doesn't decide to blow everything up like the Red Sox did.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see it happening, but who knows?
Yeah, I think year is a fluke for Texas. I think they're going to be, in the conversation to win the division or be a top wild card team each year, and be somebody who nobody wants to face in the postseason, regardless of their seeding.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The Angels, you lose Shohei Ohtani. You had 2 years where you could have gotten a huge amount for him. You could have gotten so many prospects if you didn't sign him, which is what they should have done. And they didn't, and now they have nothing. And then Mike Trout, who was outside of Boston, my favorite player growing up, watching baseball, just such a great dude, plays the game the right way, and just is so likable. He's really the gold standard for what I think everything a baseball player should be. He goes down, he's hurt, and he might be back end of July, early August. We'll see what happens, but they have not had the pitching. So if you're not going to be able to get it done with, Trout and Ohtani in their primes, how are you going to get it done when you're 14 games below 500? Trout is hurt. He might come back and you don't have any of the resources really to go. So they're not going to be the worst team in the league, but they're not making the playoffs.
No, yeah, they're a contender for worst second half record if they trade some of these guys. I think Taylor Ward will definitely be moved. Tyler Anderson maybe, but that roster is just bad. Like, uh, I really like Logan O'Hoppe, their catcher. He's young, but other than that, I mean, it's just kind of like the land of misfit toys. Like, it's all these guys that have been, DFA'd from other teams, and then the Angels don't have any prospects, so they're like, come play here. Like, we need someone to play. Like Willie Calhoun, they just cut Miguel Sano, like guys that have been out of baseball almost, and then they're just batting like third and fourth for the Angels. So I think they're going to be dreadful in the second half.
I agree. I still think they're not going to have the worst record or the second or third worst, but I think, overall the 30 team standings, they'll probably be somewhere in the 23 to 26 range is my guess at the end of 162. Which moves us to the A's. Sadly, the last year in the Coliseum, have to feel really bad for those fans. So passionate, and bad ownership has ruined it for them. They lost the Raiders, the Warriors moved a few years ago, so I feel really bad for them. I wish that the A's, had stayed instead of moving to Vegas in a few years. I think they'll be playing in Sacramento for like 2025, 2026 before they eventually go to Vegas. They are 37 and 61, which is kind of what I thought they'd be. I thought they would be dreadful. I even thought that there was a chance that they would be worse. They had a pretty good start of the season compared to where you thought they would be. Mason Miller as a really good pitcher, and I was impressed with him. But then you've had like guys like Ashuri Ruiz, who he played well, and then he was wearing one of the bands that was kind of against ownership, saying, sell the team, let's keep them in Oakland. And now they just moved like the few good players they have to AAA because they didn't like the way that they were speaking out against the team. So I just think it's a mess. I feel bad for the fans. And yeah, disaster. Anybody who's worth anything is probably going to get traded.
Yeah, the Oakland situation is it's such a bummer for me. I really love watching them play. They're one of the few like late night teams that's on all the time. So like I've watched a lot of Oakland games last year. Um, Dallas Braden is one of their announcers. I think he does an awesome job, like just being honest with fans about the team. But the ownership, it's complete malpractice. I can't believe the league hasn't stepped in. Like the Sacramento stadium you can't even call it stadium. The field that they're playing at the next 2 years, like that's not where professional baseball players should be playing. It's embarrassing. But they're gonna move Brent Rooker, JJ Bleday maybe. It's bleak there. I don't know why anybody would want to play there. Them and the Angels in the same division is so depressing. But I don't know. Maybe they'll turn it around. Maybe the team will get sold. I'm not sure, but I don't have high hopes,
I
unfortunately.
don't either. All right, that concludes the American League portion. I'm going to take a break for now, if that's good with you, Liam, because I don't want to rush through the National League because we only have, whatever it is, 14 minutes left here on Zoom, and I'd like to allow us more time so we don't rush through the National League. But yeah,
Mhm.
thanks for coming on. I enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.